While we're understandably focused on the military situation between Israel and Gaza right now, we do have to bear in mind that there is a very significant economic angle, and that angle involves the economic aid that the U.S. gives every single year to the Israeli government. So far in total, over $120 billion. That's about $3.1 billion just last year. Now, some people are calling for an end to that aid, and they are not what you would consider enemies of Israel. They are, in fact, some of the most ardent long-term defenders of Israel, but they don't like the effect our money and then the influence we get from that money has over Israeli policy. So here are some quotes from people who are big defenders of Israel. First, the experience of the Obama years has sharpened the perception among pro-Israel Americans that aid can cut against Israel by giving presidents with bad ideas more leverage than they would otherwise have. I don't know what leverage he thinks we have, but let's go on. Aid to Israel is a low bar for politicians to claim they're pro-Israel, and it'd be better if there were more substantive things one had to do to earn that title. And aid provides easy fodder for critics to claim. Apparently, you do have to do more than provide 1/4 of their defense budget. But going on, that the alliance...
How will we provide 1/4?
Depending on which year, the aid has fluctuated, but $3.1 billion is a significant portion historically in terms of their defense budget. Let's go on to another quote. Israel should be less dependent on American financial assistance and should become the kind of ally that we have in Australia, Canada, or the UK. An intimate military relationship and alliance, but no military aid. And even former Israel Home Party leader said, today U.S. military aid is roughly 1% of Israel's economy. I think generally we need to free ourselves from it. So certainly over the past 3 or more decades, it was incredibly important in helping to develop both their military, but also their homegrown military industrial complex that they now have. They have the ability to produce everything from jets to small arms. And now they feel like they're losing too much by accepting even $3 billion a year.
Okay, so this is a phenomenal development and one that I really welcome. So with the neocons who are pushing this, let's shake on it. Okay, deal, you got a deal. Let's cut the aid. Now, we might have disagreements on the panel on that, but there's a couple of nuances here. First, the first guy...
I wouldn't give him $1.
Okay.
They don't need it.
Okay, we'll get to that in a second. So first guy that's talking about it here is from the Emergency Committee for Israel. That's Noah Pollack. And they're massive neocon right-wingers, right? So he's saying, well, it's making Obama look good. They're a little uncomfortable with that. Oh my God. I mean how...
He looks great.
Look, Obama derangement syndrome, I can't find a better example than you're giving me $3 billion. Yeah. And that's making you look good. So no thank you to the $3 billion just because I don't want you to look good.
Yeah.
Insanity, right? Now, the other thing that they're...
It's like the jobs thing. It's like, well, he's got no jobs. He's got no jobs for this country. Then jobs start going up, and they're like, this is bad for the country because it's good for Obama. Yeah. So we don't want jobs.
Yeah, it's mental. I've never seen anything like this.
It is derangement.
Right. And then the second part of it is they're like, look, that means he has leverage over us, which I don't know how he used that leverage, but and these guys, remember, are hawks and they want more war, and they're like, Obama's going to prevent more war by using that leverage, so let's take that leverage away. But I don't need your $3 billion as long as I get more war. Yeah. That's basically what this guy's saying. Now, Elliot Abrams, who I have no love for and who worked for the Bush administration and pushed for the Iraq war,
and Iran-Contra, and I mean, he's a bad guy.
He's just a terrible guy. But his quote I found to be a lot more understandable.
Exactly.
Like, he was just saying, hey, listen, we don't really need it, and it's not really fair. And I was like, oh, that's actually kind of a reasonable statement.
When he says we don't really need it, who does he mean?
He means Israel.
Yeah.
Right.
He's an American, right?
Well, I mean, look, I'm paraphrasing, to be fair to Elliot Abrams. Okay.
An important number, two numbers actually, to bear in mind on why Israel might not need the aid in the same way that they did even just 14 or 15 years ago. Back in 2000, the country's GDP was $125 billion. Just 13 years later, it was more than double that at $291 billion. And that's not even counting the massive revenue they're going to be generating over the next few years and decades from natural gas reserves that they've recently discovered, but not yet massively monetized. So they certainly don't need the money in the way that they did. Now, comparing the aid that we give to Israel to other allies in the region, sort of comparable military allies in the region, let's bring up this next graph. It's going to show the aid going to Israel versus countries like Afghanistan, Egypt, Pakistan, and Nigeria, and you see the number is much larger there.
I think we owe that money to Afghanistan.
A little bit more. Yeah. I mean, their ability to produce opium has been decimated. They need that economic stimulus. But
Egypt, the giving money to Egypt dates back to Camp David.
Right.
It dates back to Jimmy Carter, and it's got to keep going, and that's part of keeping the peace, keeping them competitive. So there are reasons.
So
aside from
really
present
is-
day.
By the way, so the point that I'm hoping to get to at some point is then, so let's give the money to the other guys. Some of the money to the other guys.
So that's a really interesting point. So let's do
they
the.
can
But the Australia-Canada argument, I think, is a ridiculous argument because Australia is not a nation surrounded by its enemies on every single border.
Sharks.
Whales.
There are sharks.
Killer whales.
Okay, so I lost that one. All right. But so I think that argument hurts a little bit. The other thing is by giving money to Israel, we are subsidizing our own military, because what do we do?
Oh, that's exactly right.
And
that's exactly part of the reason I want to cut it.
Right. Well, that's what I'm saying.
So, and even one of the guys in this article who's a neocon, who had all the way back in 1996 written an article saying maybe we shouldn't give so much aid to Israel. He's very pro-Israel, etc. He's now backpedaling a little bit. He works as a lobbyist now for an energy company. But he's saying, well, we do subsidize our own military, the American military, this way. And that's a good thing.
How do we subsidize the American military?
Because we're spending a lot of that $3 billion to buy military equipment from American defense contractors and send to Israel.
And this is not just Israel. Many countries do this. It's a gigantic chunk of money.
How much could we? forget. They're not going to build a natural gas pipeline, and they're not going to build a nuclear reactor. But I've seen pictures of Gaza. They could use $3 billion.
Well, and that's why one of the arguments, whether you talk about all these nations, I work for a company that is owned by the government of Qatar, and everyone's saying, oh, they're enemies of Israel, they're giving to Hamas, how can you work for them? People say, they're not. They're giving money to Gaza for exactly what you're talking about, and a lot of these countries to build the country up, the infrastructure. Exactly. So not exclusively, and their tendencies are probably to support Gaza over to support Hamas, but they're giving to infrastructure, which is so important, and exactly what Ben's saying. Why don't we start building things?
It's funny because we were just having a conversation earlier in the week about what I would do if I wanted to actually get to peace. And if I was the president, somebody I think asked in Twitter Storm, and I said, what I would do is pull back money from both sides and be like, okay, look, you're going to stop building settlements if you're Israel, and you're going to get to the negotiation table. And the Palestinians, we also give hundreds of millions of dollars to. And you're also going to stop asking for eternal right of return for every single Palestinian, et cetera. And you're going to get to the negotiation. And well, you know why? Because otherwise, Israel, you're not going to get the $3 billion, and the Palestinian Authority, you're not going to get the hundreds of millions of dollars we're giving you. And that's what these neocons are afraid of. We don't have a president who would ever do that, right? So it's a misplaced concern. Right. You don't have President Uygur. If you did, then your concern would be well placed, because I would use that immediately, because I would try to get the peace. But we don't care enough about peace to use that.
Of other concerns, though.
Right, then we would have other problems. But that goes to Ben's point. That's part of why foreign aid is not so bad if you only care about American strategic interests, because you use that for leverage, right? So if you gave more money to the Palestinians, believe me, you can get them to do more stuff for you, because you say, now you want to lose 300 million, you want to lose 500 million, you want to lose 700 million dollars. But that's a way of buying people off. Now that sucks in some ways, but it's also realpolitik. And in this case, we don't ever use our leverage.
Yeah, unfortunately, I can't imagine trying to sell that idea in the current U.S. political climate that we have.
Inconceivable.
Now, it's interesting, I think, this development among some neocons and neocon organizations, and that's why we're talking about it. But let's not forget what happened to Rand Paul when he very briefly implied that we should at least scale back, if not eliminate, Israeli foreign aid. He was attacked mercilessly from the right for that suggestion, and now doesn't seem to support it. And so it's a trend, perhaps. It might increase in the future, but currently I think there are still a lot of neocons that love giving them that money.
So here's a perspective that I think is really stunning. When you look at our foreign aid per capita, if you thought it was huge in regards to Israel before, take a look at this chart. Israel per capita gets $378.33. That's per every person in Israel. That's how much we give them. Afghanistan then falls to $62.74. Egypt falls all the way down to about $17. Pakistan, which is the fourth largest aid recipient of U.S. money, falls all the way down to $4.69, etc. So the contrast is stark and amazing. But look at that top number. We are giving every Israeli $378, and they have a budget surplus. We have a massive deficit. Yeah. That's insanity. Even if you thought they're the greatest ally any country has ever had, why would you do that? That just makes no sense whatsoever.
They should be giving us money.
Yeah.
They have the surplus, and they have now gas reserves, right?
Yeah, exactly, which isn't included in this. And by the way, when you look at the $343 or whatever that we give them, it might be easy for some people who haven't lived there, don't know what it's like there, to think, oh, well, they have so little, they need it or something. But let's bring up the third chart, the final one, showing the per capita GDP. $34,000. For comparison's sake, now this is more recent, but for comparison's sake, in 2012, the U.S. Per capita GDP was $51.7 thousand. So it's a significant portion of what the average U.S. citizen makes. And so that's a lot of money.
Showing up a lot on these lists, but we haven't talked about them. So I'm just going to say, hey, look, Nigeria.
No, none of us would have gotten Nigeria right, but why is Nigeria on there? Because they are the largest oil-producing country in Africa. So.
Yeah.
So that's why they need aid.
Well, they need aid, exactly, to protect their reserves and to make sure that the people in power stay in power in Nigeria.
And honestly,
good luck,
on our
John.
side.
And on our side, yeah.